"We're cutting you off," she said, as if severing a limb she no longer needed. No tears, no thanks, just those 4 words. Clinical, like a business transaction. After years of holding this family together with late-night calls, emergency loans, and a loyalty that cost me sleep, they decided I was disposable. But the universe has a strange sense of timing. That same night, I got an email. Subject line: Bundy Estate, primary beneficiary notification. Funny how people who think they've erased you forget one thing. Some truths don't burn. If you've ever felt replaced, erased, or just quietly pushed aside by your own blood, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, drop a 0 and hold your people close, because sometimes the real inheritance isn't money, it's clarity. "We're cutting you off," she said, as if severing a limb she no longer needed. It wasn't rage, it was precision. The line went cold before I could speak. Not that I had anything left to say. I stared at my phone, then at the bowl of mushroom risotto I'd made. Steam curling up into the ceiling like it, too, was trying to escape. Outside, November snow pressed against the windows of my tiny apartment in Brooklyn, turning the city's chaos into a watercolor of red taillights and white noise. It didn't come out of nowhere. I'd seen the signs, the way Ruth's birthday calls turned into brisk voicemails, how Sunday dinners continued without an invitation, how Miles suddenly had other plans when I visited. I used to think if I worked harder, if I stayed useful, they'd remember I was family. But maybe I'd been furniture, comfortable, unnoticed, and easy to rearrange. I turned off the stove. The heater in the corner buzzed like a tired insect. It had been doing that for weeks, but tonight it felt louder, like it was mocking me for being surprised. The words rang in my ears. "Cutting you off." As if I were a credit card past its limit. Not my daughter, not blood. Just a transaction that no longer justified the cost. There was a time when I paid Miles's college tuition behind Ruth's back. When Dad had his stroke, I moved home for 6 months, feeding him mashed peas and changing his linens while Ruth managed logistics. I never once asked for thanks. I only ever asked to belong. What changed? I did. I began saying no. When Ruth asked me to co-sign a loan for her business remodel, I declined. When Miles wanted help buying a car, I told him to ask our parents. Boundaries, they call it, in therapy. Betrayal, they call it in my family. And yet, I didn't cry. That was the cruelest part. Relief ballooned in my chest where grief should have lived. I hated myself for it. Hated how light I felt. Like I'd just removed a splinter I'd been too afraid to look at for years. I sat at the kitchen table, flicking through old emails, most of them ads and newsletters I never read. One stood out, its subject line clinical and confusing. Bundy Estate, primary beneficiary notification. My finger hovered. I clicked. The email was from a law firm in upstate New York. It began with condolences, then shifted into legal jargon about estate disbursements and inheritance claims. The name at the center, Charles Bundy. My grandfather, Ruth's father. We weren't close. He was the kind of man who believed emotions were indulgent. But he sent me handwritten letters when I was in college, slipped me 20s for books when Ruth wasn't looking. When he died last year, I hadn't even been told the funeral date. And now, this? I read the line 3 times. You have been named the primary beneficiary of the Bundy estate, valued at approximately $69 million. I laughed, a dry, cracked sound that startled even me. Was this a mistake? Some legal spam? Number, my name was there. My address. A contact number I hadn't used in years. I sat back, cold creeping up my spine despite the heater. The apartment didn't feel small anymore. It felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was untethered. I reached for the old wool scarf hanging by the door. It was dark green, coarse to the touch, and still smelled faintly of cedar. Grandpa had given it to me one Christmas when I was 13, mumbling that it looked like something a smart girl would wear. I'd kept it all these years, though I rarely wore it. Tonight, I draped it around my shoulders, not for warmth, but for memory. The room dimmed with twilight, and my thoughts stretched thin. I thought of the summers at Grandpa's lake house, the chipped mug he let me use, the way he'd tap the table twice before standing. Rituals. Small things that didn't feel like much until you realized they were all you had left. Why would he name me? Ruth had 3 children. Miles, the golden boy. Lana, the baby girl who could do no wrong. I was the one who refused to join the family business, who moved out at 20 and didn't look back for years. And yet, the lawyer's email was clear. I read it again. Primary beneficiary. The phrase rang louder than Ruth's sentence. It cut through my doubt like a knife through snowfall. But it didn't answer the question echoing inside me. Why me? Maybe Grandpa saw what Ruth never did. Maybe he watched from a distance and knew I was the one holding everyone else up, like a cracked foundation beneath a crumbling house. The heater clicked off. My reflection in the window was ghostly, haloed by city lights and drifting snow. I didn't look triumphant. I looked tired. Grief was an odd companion, trailing just behind relief, like a shadow that couldn't quite catch up. I opened the drawer where I kept loose papers. Bills, expired coupons, birthday cards never mailed. I found the last letter Grandpa wrote me, still in its envelope, still unread. It had arrived the day after he died, and I couldn't bear to open it then. Now, I slid my finger under the seal. Inside, just 2 lines. Delaney, sometimes the ones who keep quiet are the ones who deserve the most. Don't let them tell you who you are. My chest tightened. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table beside my laptop. The scarf slipped from my shoulders to the floor. Outside, the snow kept falling, silent, persistent. What could possibly be worth $69 million? And why did she never mention it? When I opened that box, it didn't smell like mold. It smelled like erasure. The attic groaned as I stepped onto its brittle floorboards, each plank creaking like it was remembering something it wished it could forget. The air was colder than I expected, sharp and still, like winter air trapped in a jar. A cinnamon-sweet candle had burned recently, its fragrance lingering like a ghost in a room nobody lived in anymore. This house never felt like mine, not even when I was a child visiting in the summers. I'd ask to explore the attic, beg even, but Ruth always said it wasn't safe, or that there were things not meant for little girls. I thought it was where the Christmas ornaments were kept. Maybe it was, or maybe it was where truths went to die. Byron met me at the front steps with a forced smile and a key I didn't ask for. Your mother said you wanted your old school books, he mumbled, unlocking the front door without making eye contact. He didn't follow me inside, just stood there, like a gatekeeper, unsure whether to bless or curse the trespasser. The attic stairs were narrower than I remembered. Dust lined the handrail in thick, lazy waves. Each step I climbed felt heavier, like I was ascending into some version of the past that had been preserved in cobwebs and cold air. At the top, I hesitated. The door was closed, and the keyhole was tarnished with time. The brass key Byron gave me was cold, smooth, oddly clean. It clicked into place like it belonged there more than I ever had. The attic was cluttered, but deliberate. Plastic bins marked Xmas, cracked boxes of old receipts, even an antique trunk with leather straps barely holding on. It smelled like wood rot and cinnamon. Not decay, but concealment. I knelt beside a stack of National Geographics, their covers faded but proud. A hollow thunk echoed when I moved one aside. Curious, I pulled a thick, cracked Bible from beneath the magazines. Its spine was broken, but it had weight, the kind of weight that hid things. Inside, where pages should have been pressed with prayers and underlines, a cavity had been carved. A sealed envelope nestled in the center. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. It was dated 2 years before Grandpa died. The handwriting was unmistakably his, sharp, slanted, deliberate. I broke the seal slowly, scared of what I'd find, but more afraid of never knowing. The will was short, clear, and devastating. Full beneficiary, Delaney M. Clark. No legal ambiguity, no conditions, just my name, standing alone like it had always been meant to. My breath caught in my chest. I felt 1,000 emotions crash into each other. Gratitude, confusion, sorrow, and something darker. Betrayal. Why was this hidden? Why wasn't it with the official documents? Have you ever discovered that someone tried to erase your worth, quietly, in the shadows? That moment when proof of your truth appears, but so does the sting of betrayal? If that resonates with you, leave a comment number 7 below. Let's see where the truth takes us next. The edges of the paper were charred. A burn mark licked the corners like someone had hesitated before setting it alight. I ran my thumb along the blackened margin, imagining Ruth with a lighter, hesitating, then stuffing it in the Bible instead. Erasure, interrupted. Tucked in the same cavity were several birthday cards, all addressed to me in Grandpa's neat script. They were never sent. Some had stamps. One still had a $20 bill inside. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the cards in my lap like pieces of a conversation we never finished. Then I saw the notebook. Brown leather, weather-worn. My name etched faintly in the corner. Inside were chess diagrams, rook to e4, bishop to d6, annotated with messy notes. I remembered Grandpa teaching me chess on rainy Sundays. "Always protect your queen," he'd say, eyes twinkling like he meant more than the game. Pages later, he'd written ideas for a foundation. Scholarships for underrepresented girls in engineering, named after Delaney. I pressed my hand to my mouth. A foundation? For me? Or in my name? He had plans. He saw me, even when no one else did. A floorboard creaked below. Byron? No, just the house shifting under the weight of what had been forgotten. I gathered the documents carefully, then stood. My legs felt like stilts. I needed answers. I needed the truth. I needed to hear someone say this wasn't madness. Back in the kitchen, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the email from the lawyer. My thumb hovered over the number. I pressed call. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered. "Delaney," the man said, calm and low. "I've been expecting your call for years." I didn't respond right away. My throat felt tight. His words carried the weight of secrets finally surfacing. What did he mean, for years? Did Grandpa tell him about me? About what he planned? I started, then paused. I found something. A will. In the attic. It had my name. The margins were burned. A soft sigh from his end. "You weren't supposed to know that way. Charles had concerns." "Concerns?" He paused. "He told me your mother might not honor his wishes, that she had other plans for the estate, so he made copies. Hide them." My knees buckled slightly. I sat down on the old kitchen stool, letting the words sink in. He always spoke of you, Delaney. Said you saw things others ignored. That you didn't flinch when the truth was ugly. My eyes burned, not from the cold, from remembering a man I thought had been indifferent, but who, in the quiet margins of life, had been paying attention all along. I looked down at the notebook again. One of the final pages simply read, "Legacy, not what we leave behind, but who we believe in while we're still here." And he'd believed in me, even when they didn't. They sent me an invitation, probably out of guilt or politeness. I RSP'd. Yes. I had a plan. The envelope was thick cream stock, embossed in gold. I held it up to the light when it arrived, half expecting a mistake. My name, my address, no mistake. For a moment, I wondered if Miles even knew I'd been invited, or if Ruth had added my name out of habit. Or perhaps, and more likely, out of some hollow attempt to save face. The last family event I'd attended, I served punch and cleared cocktail napkins while wearing a second-hand dress. Ruth had introduced me as helpful. That night, I cried in the car while the taillights of their laughter disappeared down the driveway. This time, I chose red. Not a fire truck red or a garish crimson, but a deep blood wine color that matched the exact shade of defiance. My dress was simple, tasteful, but it screamed in contrast to the pastels and winter creams that blanketed the garden like frost. The venue was elegant. White tents stretched over trimmed hedges, fairy lights tangled in bare branches, and the hum of outdoor heaters masking murmured judgments. It smelled like vanilla cake and roses frozen in bloom. Jazz standards floated through the air. Sinatra, Ella, a faint echo of Louis Armstrong as children danced, uncoordinated and wild near the dessert table. No one greeted me. There was no place card for Delaney. Aunt Nancy squinted at me like she was peering into a memory she didn't want to acknowledge. "Oh, you're just visiting, right?" she chirped, before floating away on a wave of champagne bubbles and denial. I found a table near the edge of the tent, half shadowed by a swaying heater. From there, I watched Miles, dressed in charcoal, beaming beside his bride in something gauzy and pearl-strewn. His smile was genuine, maybe even happy. But I saw the flicker when his eyes found mine. Surprise? Regret? I couldn't tell. The DJ called for attention. Toasts were to begin shortly. My moment was coming. I stood slowly, felt every eye not looking at me. Walked past a cousin slipping champagne to someone clearly underage, past Ruth chatting with a woman I didn't know but instinctively disliked. My heels crunched softly on gravel as I made my way to the DJ booth. "I need the mic," I said. The DJ blinked, unsure, then handed it over like he wasn't paid enough to ask questions. I didn't speak. I walked across the floor toward the newlyweds. Each step felt like threading a needle. Careful, steady, unshaking. I handed them a white envelope. Inside, a notarized copy of Grandpa's will, carefully enclosed in a folder marked Bundy Legacy Holdings. The gasps weren't dramatic, just soft inhales, the kind that spread faster than fire. Miles opened the envelope while his bride looked on, frozen into blow. Then I turned. The exit path was clear, but just before I reached the hedges, I heard her. "Delaney!" Ruth's voice, low and pointed. She'd followed me outside. I turned slowly. Her heels crunched behind me, closer now. "How could you?" she hissed. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't flinch. "How could you?" I replied. We stood like that, silence stretching between us, the music still playing behind the tent, like nothing had happened. But something had, and it wouldn't be undone. I kept walking after that final exchange, but not in triumph. The air outside was bitter, sharp with pine and smoke from the outdoor heaters. I found the guest parking lot, half full and dimly lit. I leaned against my rental car, trying to steady my breath. My fingers, still cold from holding the envelope, now trembled. Not from fear, from release. I remembered the time Miles broke his arm falling off the treehouse, and I rode in the ambulance with him. I remembered staying up 3 nights in a row to edit his college applications, because no one else would. I remembered Ruth standing at the foot of my bed when I was 13, telling me I needed to be the example because I was the oldest, the girl, and I remembered never being thanked. There had been a time when I would have wilted under Ruth's question, when I'd search myself for fault, but tonight wasn't that time. Tonight, I gave back what she thought she'd buried. Behind me, the party returned to its rhythm. Clinking glasses, a burst of laughter, the faint scratch of a slow dance beginning, Nat King Cole this time. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, not to soothe, but to mark the moment. When I opened them again, I saw a shadow from the tent's edge, a little girl, maybe 7, in white tights and a puffy jacket. She'd been watching. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just nodded once, then ran back toward the light. Even in families that erase, something always survives. I opened the car door, slid in, and left the reception behind. Not with fireworks, not with vengeance, with clarity. I thought the wedding envelope was enough. I was wrong. That night, they tried to erase me again. Literally. The Bundy estate at midnight didn't look haunted, but something about it felt colder than winter should allow. The sky hung heavy with cloud-thick silence, only broken by the crunch of gravel beneath my boots and the occasional rattle of wind chimes swinging half-heartedly from the porch. They'd been there since I was 10. Grandpa had strung them up himself. "So the wind has a voice," he once said, smiling at me from behind his reading glasses. That night, the wind had a story to tell. I saw the smoke first, a lazy wisp curling above the trash bins lined against the curb. My pace quickened. I rounded the garage and froze. Byron stood there like a statue, hands in the pockets of his corduroy coat, a silver lighter dangling from 2 fingers. Beside him, the bins brimmed with papers curling at the edges, blackening and folding in on themselves like dried petals. The scent was acrid, familiar, burning ink, scorched cardboard, cinnamon wax. My breath caught as I stepped forward and yanked open the lid of the nearest bin. Flame licked at a torn manila folder. I kicked snow over it, then dug my hands into the mess. Pages flaked and crumbled. Others were intact, barely. A binder, half melted at the spine, revealed itself beneath the ash. I pulled it free, coughing at the smoke, fingers numb with cold and rage. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Grandpa's tight, deliberate handwriting addressed to Dad. Notes in the margins, dates, mentions of company meetings, warnings about stock transfers, requests for signature confirmations. They'd sold his shares, behind his back, and documented the whole thing. "You shouldn't be here," Ruth's voice cracked behind me. Her eyes were red, not from crying, I realized, but from smoke. Her scarf was misaligned, lipstick smudged. She looked like someone who'd lost control of the script. "It was all old junk," she said quickly. "Nothing worth keeping." I looked down at the binder in my hands, then back up. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice to do anything but scream. Instead, I stepped back, snapped photos of everything: the bins, the documents, Byron's lighter, her expression. Then I reached into the other bin and pulled out a warped cardboard box that hadn't yet caught. Its flaps were damp from condensation, edges singed but intact. I cradled it against my chest like it might dissolve. "Delaney!" Ruth tried again, quieter now. He didn't mean to choose you. You were just the last thing he could hold on to. I shook my head. Number I was the only one who didn't let go. I walked past her, past Byron, who looked like he wanted to say something, but settled for staring at his shoes, and made my way to my car. Inside, with the box in the passenger seat and my coat still dusted with soot, I opened it carefully. Folders, receipts, journals, and one letter. A sealed envelope with my name in Grandpa's unmistakable script. Delaney. It was dated 6 months before his death. The paper was thick, cream-colored, the ink slightly faded, but strong. I held it between my hands, heart thudding, but I couldn't open it. As I sat still in the car, the heater struggling to combat the December cold, my mind drifted, not to the chaos of tonight, but to a quieter memory. I must have been 8, maybe 9, curled in a blanket on Grandpa's old armchair. He sat opposite me, his chessboard balanced on the coffee table, firelight flickering against the walls. "You don't win by moving first," he'd said softly, guiding my hand to place a pawn. "You win by paying attention." That night came rushing back with startling clarity. How he paused between moves to jot something in a small, leather-bound notebook, the same one I now saw peeking out of the rescued box. I hadn't recognized it until now. I opened it gently. The first few pages were lined with strategy diagrams, but then came something else. Entries, thoughts, observations. Delaney stood up to Ruth today. She's braver than she knows. Another page. Miles doesn't want the responsibility. Only Delaney listens. Tears burned unexpectedly in my eyes. These weren't just musings. They were proof, not just of love, but of intent. My place in his life hadn't been accidental. Outside, the wind picked up. The chime sounded again, brittle and out of tune. I thought about going back to confront Ruth once more, to demand an answer for why she would rather destroy his memory than share it. But I didn't. Some battles aren't won with fire. They're won with preservation, with remembering. I reached into the box and gently placed the letter on top of the notebook. One day I'd open it. But for now, just knowing it existed, that he'd written to me, that he'd chosen me, that was enough to breathe. I sit in my car, letter trembling in my hands. I can't open it, not yet. People think money solves everything, but when I opened Grandpa's letter, all I felt was grief. The paper felt fragile in my hands, almost too soft to have carried such weight. I sat on the edge of my bed, the early Manhattan light streaming across the quilt, catching the folds of the letter I'd been too afraid to open the night before. My fingers trembled, not from cold, but from the realization that once I read this, nothing would be the same. He had folded the pages neatly, 3 creases down the middle, the kind that left tiny ridges over time. His handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, slanted, like his speech. I had memorized that scrawl from years of birthday cards and notes scribbled on the back of receipts. But this wasn't a casual sentiment. This was intentional, final. "Delaney," it began, "if you're holding this letter, it means they've failed to destroy everything." I swallowed, my mouth dry. That one sentence struck harder than any courtroom gavel. He spoke of my graduation, the day he pulled me aside after everyone else had left the restaurant. "One day," he said, "you'll understand why I kept quiet." At the time, I thought it was about family tension. Those glances Ruth cast across the table like knives, the way Miles deferred and Dad disappeared behind silence. But now, I saw the cracks he had been mapping all along. He admitted he had known about the whispers, about the erasures, about how decisions had been made in rooms I was excluded from. Your mother, he wrote, never forgave you for seeing through her, and your silence only made you stronger. He detailed how Ruth had influenced his doctors, even overridden his care wishes in small, manipulative ways. He believed she feared I'd uncover how much of his holdings had been rerouted, slowly, subtly, into her control. But he had fought back in the only way he could, by ensuring I was the beneficiary of what remained untouched. It was never just about the money, the letter read. It was about dignity, about choosing someone who wouldn't sell it for comfort. My tears blurred the ink. I pressed the pages to my chest, feeling their creases against my heart. He mentioned Dad, Walter, only briefly, but with weight. He tried Delaney, not loudly, but enough, and that cost him more than you know. It was the first time I had seen my father in that light, not passive, but cornered. Shut down by a woman who mastered silence as strategy. I stood by the window then, the letter folded against my heart, staring at the muted city beyond. Honks, footsteps, life going on, uncaring. But inside my apartment, time still stood still. It felt like morning, not for Grandpa alone, but for the version of my family I used to pretend existed. The last line of the letter read, "Do with it what they never could. Heal, not hoard." I read it again, and again, letting each word land like a slow drumbeat. He had known the storm this would bring, yet he trusted me with the aftermath. A soft breeze moved the sheer curtain. I imagined Grandpa by the fireplace, glasses low on his nose, reading the paper. That image steadied me, gave me breath. Then the phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. "Ms. Clark?" a voice asked, clipped and formal. "We need to speak regarding a pending lawsuit, filed this morning by Ruth Bundy." I lowered the phone slowly, my breath catching mid-chest. A lawsuit? Of course! She hadn't even waited for a conversation, no questions, no confrontation, just paperwork, cold and clinical, her preferred language. I sat back down, the letter still warm from my hands. My eyes wandered to the photo frame on my nightstand, one of the few I'd kept from childhood. I'm 10 years old, missing a front tooth, standing next to Grandpa at the Bundy cabin, holding a fishing rod too big for my arms. He had his hand on my shoulder, looking not at the camera, but at me. That gaze, the quiet pride in it, I'd missed it for years without knowing. I remembered how he used to hum when he carved wood in the garage, old jazz tunes I'd never learned the names of. Sometimes I'd just sit there, swinging my legs, waiting for him to say something wise. "People hide what they love when they're scared of losing it," he once said, smoothing a sandpapered edge. "But the good ones, they love out loud." He loved me out loud in those pages, even if no one else ever heard it. I folded the letter gently, slid it back into its envelope, and placed it in the drawer with the photo and a chess pawn he'd carved for me. A knight, smooth, dark walnut. That piece had always been his favorite. They could take me to court. They could drag my name through the mud. But they couldn't take this. They couldn't rewrite what he left behind. Have you ever had to protect something that no one else believed in? Except one person who saw you all along? If you've ever carried someone's faith in you like armor, drop a number 9 in the comments. Now, let's see how I fight for it. I stared out the window once more, whispering into the still morning, "I won't hoard it, Grandpa." I'll heal. My phone buzzes. Unknown number. "Ms. Clark, we need to speak regarding a pending lawsuit, filed this morning by Ruth Bundy." In court, they brought photos, accusations, character witnesses. I brought the truth, and Grandpa's words in my voice. The courthouse smelled like old paper and lemon disinfectant. pale green walls framed wooden benches that creaked under tension. Outside, rain tapped a quiet rhythm against the windows, as if trying to soften what was about to unfold inside. I sat at the plaintiff's table, palms flat on the smooth grain of the wood. My lawyer, a kind-eyed woman named Simone, whispered last-minute reassurances, but I barely registered them. Everything I needed was in the folder in front of me. Grandpa's letter, his voice memos, ledgers, and my resolve. Across the aisle sat Ruth and Miles. Miles avoided my gaze, his tie slightly crooked, eyes fixed on the floor. Ruth looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Sharp suit, colder expression. Her lawyer clicked his pen rhythmically, prepared to repaint me as a manipulative grandchild exploiting an old man. They tried. Oh, they tried. They brought up my absence from family events, the fact that I'd refused to fund Miles's second business venture. The letter, they claimed, could have been coerced, written under duress. But when Simone played the audio recording of Grandpa's voice saying my name, clear and deliberate, everything else dimmed. He said, "Delaney never asked for anything, but I gave it to her because she never stopped seeing me as a man, not a wallet." The room grew still. Even the judge leaned forward. Then came the burned documents, scanned, reprinted, restored as best we could. Pages with edges blackened like forgotten toast. Simone laid them before the court like relics. "If she intended to preserve his wishes," she said, motioning toward Ruth, "why destroy every trace of them?" Ruth's reply was ice and deflection. "We thought they were old drafts. He was confused." "But he wasn't," I said, rising to speak. My voice didn't shake. "He left me the estate because I saw him, not as a legacy, not as leverage, but as my grandfather. And because I kept quiet when it would have been easier to scream." The judge nodded, took a long breath, then delivered the verdict. Grandpa's wishes were clear. The estate remained in my name. No damages, no division, no restitution for Ruth. Just silence, and the sound of a gavel. We walked out into the drizzle. I didn't look back until I heard my name. Ruth stood there, arms folded. Her eyes, once blazing with contempt, now shimmered with something else. Not hate, not even anger, fear. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Miles stood behind her, hands shoved deep into his pockets, gaze cast at the wet sidewalk. He never looked up. I walked past them, not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to say. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of silence that wraps itself around your bones. I drove there directly from the courthouse, still wearing the same navy dress and trench coat. The rain had tapered to a mist, soft as breath, and the honeysuckle that lined the old fence released a scent that tugged at memory. I carried the envelope under my arm, the last page I'd saved from the fire. Its edge curled, its corner blackened, but the handwriting remained. Grandpa's looping cursive, part of a grocery list on the back, as if even his legacies rode alongside the mundane. I had folded it carefully, not wanting it to disintegrate from moisture or time. His grave was near the far edge, beneath a crooked oak. No gaudy headstone, just a flat marker with his name and the years he'd bridged. I stood there for a long time, unsure if I wanted to speak. Words had always come easily to me, but not now. Kneeling slowly, I placed the paper on the grass. The wind tried to take it. I pressed it down with a flat stone, the weight of something both literal and not. "They tried," I whispered. "They really tried." I closed my eyes. In the distance, wind chimes tinkled. Maybe from a porch down the hill, maybe from memory. I saw his chair by the fireplace, the one that creaked in rhythm to his reading. I saw the way he handed me things with both hands, like they mattered. Like I mattered. They never broke me, I said, not to him, to myself. When I stood again, the clouds began to part. The air cleared, soft golden light sliding through the remaining drops on branches. My coat smelled of wet earth and paper. I walked back slowly, not with triumph, not with vengeance, but with something heavier and more freeing. Closure. Not all scars fade. Some become maps. I drove home in silence. No music, no calls. Just the hum of tires and the steady rhythm of breathing. And for the first time in years, it was enough. Sometimes I still hear the echo of that gavel, not as a verdict, but as a full stop to a chapter I didn't know I needed to end. What stayed with me most wasn't the money or even the justice. It was the letter and the way Grandpa believed in me when no one else did. I've come to believe that healing doesn't always look like a reunion. It often means learning to walk forward without dragging every broken thing behind you. If any part of this story reminded you of your own family journey, I'd be honored if you shared it in the comments below. And if these kinds of stories speak to your heart, feel free to follow along. I'd love to have you here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.